Hi, I'm Dave March, the Spy Guy. I haven't done a video in a little while. One of my last week, I kind of came down with a mild cold, a real mild cold. Only I can really detect it, but I get it, and I just decided not to do any videos. It gave me some time to reflect on what I was doing with this channel, and I've decided to give up on this whole daily commentary on what's going on in the world. I'll maybe do stuff when there's a break, like a breaking story, like the FBI FISA scandal. If there's something new with that, I'll come in and comment on that. But I really want to start focusing on real stuff, which is the doing history stuff. And I'm going to make these intel reports. We're going to talk about different things like sources, methods, books, movies, whatever. So it's going to be kind of a grab bag of stuff. And today I'm going to talk to you about something I kind of looked into today. Sorry, a little muggy in here for some stupid reason. Anyways, I went through this book. It's called Covert Operations. It's from the 80s for a game called Top Secret SI. And what they got is a guy named John Prados, who I've read a lot of his articles. He actually wrote books about spies and intelligence, and he's made some games over the years, and like way more professional version of me, I guess. Anyways, in this book, he covers people like the CIA and the KGB in this particular one, and gives you the real history and how it works. But at the end, he has these things called case studies of actual spies. So we're going to look at one spy today, Fedora, and I'm also going to cover some of the other stuff I learned about Fedora today and compile this all into one video. So first, source Fedora was, at the time the writing of this in the 80s, was considered one of the most great mysteries of post-war intelligence lore. And now we have more data in 2020 than we had in the 80s. When was this book written? Sorry, I didn't think about that earlier. 1987. So now we are 33 years later. We have a lot more stuff, and we can cover more of what they have. So he was a codename assigned to by the FBI to a Soviet agent, a walk-in. So a walk-in is like just comes off the street and goes to the whatever intelligence agency sometime and says, "Hey, I'm working for this guy. I'm willing to work for you." And just walks right through the embassy doors or the agency doors in this case. This was a Russian, described himself as an officer in the first chief directorate of the KGB, unit charged with collecting technical and scientific intelligence, and insisted it was disillusioned with the Soviet system. Fedora offered to provide the United States with information on Soviet nuclear weapons and guided missile programs, major targets for U.S. intelligence collectors. It was highly unusual for the FBI to run a positive intelligence agent. That's certainly true. They're the counterintelligence division, but this guy came and walked into their door, so they decided to poach him instead of handing him over to the CIA, which is what they should have done. But given it was this guy was also working at the United Nations, they might have thought that was more appropriate, given that this UN is kind of international territory based in New York and has all this weird stuff. So maybe they thought they would run him while he was in New York. It would be easier than having the CIA run him while he was in New York. The most likely this is only possible because the contact occurred inside the U.S. and because Fedora approached the FBI. And J. Edgar Hoover, the chief of the FBI, immediately adopted the source without much thought to Fedora's bona fides, reportedly noting early report to the fact that its source was of known reliability. Although standard arrangements within the U.S. intelligence community provide for pooling information, especially about sources and their reliability, the FBI was loath to do this with Fedora. At first, the CIA was unable to learn the identity of the source, and the FBI even withheld from Langley contextual information sufficient to allow independent judgments as to Fedora's access. They really kept it close to the vest. That's certainly something you can say about Hoover. He didn't like to share. He liked to have special access, like to do special things. In order to make himself better. Oh, by the way, the briefing room here behind me, I've been trying to do more briefing rooms. So this one here is for SIOC, an agency within the FBI. Maybe I'll do a future episode on them. Anyways, at first Fedora did supply certain intelligence on sorry, it's very muggy in here. On Soviet missile systems, and later some on Soviet bargaining positions and strategic arms limitation talks. But in the mid-60s, after the defection of KGB officer Yuri Nosenko, who many believe to have been a plant intended to mislead the United States, I'll do an episode on Nosenko, Fedora provided information confirming portions of his story that later shown to have been false. He also supplied information exposing a British agent. Yes, your allies spy on you, you spy on them. The United States was spying on Merkel's phone calls for a reason, right? Some of Fedora's reports were judged so important that Hoover took them directly to the president. This was the case in '69 when Fedora confirmed a report from another FBI Soviet source, Top Hat, supposedly a KGB colonel at the UN, that a priority assignment since '67 had been to assess U.S. capability for chemical warfare. The implicit suggestion of an incipient arms race for chemical weapons was among the factors that led Richard Nixon to adopt a policy of announcing the development of further chemical weapons in a presidential decision of November '69. Yeah, the United States decided just to say, screw it, we're just going to nuke you. No biological weapons, no chemical weapons. We'll just nuke you if you use those on us, because we have those. Similarly, in 1971, Hoover carried to Nixon a Fedora report that Daniel Ellsberg had given a copy of the Pentagon Papers to the Soviet embassy. We'll probably talk about Ellsberg in a later episode. Fearing such leaks, Nixon set up a covert unit called the Plumbers, another episode, in the White House that used extra legal means and helped embroil the president in Watergate. Fedora eventually retired from work at the United Nations. In 1981, source Fedora returned to the Soviet Union and commented on his original protestations of dissatisfaction with Russia. Some counterintelligence specialists, like James J. Engel of the CIA, we could do an entire season on him, had been skeptical of Fedora for some time. An FBI reevaluation in 1980 reportedly concluded that Fedora had remained loyal to the KGB all along. Truth about Fedora, however, will never be known. So we now know things about Fedora because we had the Soviet Union fell. And we'll go into talking about some of those things here. So first thing I did when I was reading about Fedora is I, of course, went to Wikipedia. And now we know that Fedora was a codename for one Alexei Sidorovich Kulak from 1923 to 1983. KGB agent who infiltrated the United Nations during the Cold War. While working in New York, Kulak contacted the FBI and offered his services. Kulak told his American handlers that there was a KGB mole working at the FBI, leading to a decades-long mole hunt that seriously disrupted the agency. And we're just about to go get into that. And it's not clear whether Kulak was acting as a double agent supplying the information or whether his information was legitimate, as we covered earlier. He was a war hero, and he had the hero of the USSR. I can't seem to find what that was for, but he, with a PhD in chemistry. The hero of the Soviet Union is basically the Congressional Medal of Honor, or like getting a British knighthood. If you're going to screw over someone like that, or investigate someone like that, you have to be extremely careful and extremely sure of yourself. He was sent by the KGB to New York City in the early 60s with the cover of being assigned as a consultant in the United Nations on the effects of radiation. In March 1962, he walked into an FBI field office in New York City and offered his service to the FBI in exchange for cash. When asked whether he was worried about having been spotted walking in the FBI office, he immediately offered a clue that he knew of the mole in the FBI, telling agents that the KGB's agents were occupied, meaning an FBI agent who was spying for the Soviet Union. He later identified this guy as Dick. Kulak's information set off a decades-long mole hunt in the FBI, and never been conclusively determined whether or not the mole was working for the FBI. We'll cover that in the third piece shortly. It was never conclusively proven that Kulak's approach to the FBI was not a KGB feint to throw the FBI's counterintelligence operation into disarray, which his revelation did in fact do. Yes, we'll be covering that shortly. In 1963, Kulak switched his KGB cover to science attaché at the Soviet embassy and continued working on there until 1967, when he returned to Moscow. In 1971, Kulak returned to New York for a second tour of duty, which lasted until 1976. Though he's considered a reliable source, by the end of his second tour, the FBI was beginning to suspect Kulak was secretly controlled by the KGB and was feeding false information to the Americans. Still, before he left New York City, he was recruited by Gus Hathaway, the CIA agent who handled Wayne Adolf Tolkachev, the billion-dollar spy. Another whole episode will be dealt with him to continue his espionage work for the Americans upon his return to Moscow. In 1977, back in Moscow, Kulak resumed contact with the CIA and provided a valuable list of Soviet scientists attempting to steal U.S. scientific secrets. He promised to provide even more valuable sets of data about the inner workings of the KGB and the Soviet Union's efforts to steal American tech. However, when he signaled to make contact with CIA agents, he got no response. This was because the director, Stansfield Turner, we'll have another episode on him, had issued orders to the Moscow CIA station to halt contact with undercover spies out of fear that the station had been compromised. So Kulak kept trying to make contact and never did. Also in 1970, a book by one Edward J. Epstein described Fedora enough detail to make it likely that KGB was able to identify Kulak as the source. With his cover probably blown, the CIA offered to exfiltrate him. But Kulak said, "Fuck, screw that noise. I'm just going to live here in the Soviet Union." He died apparently of natural causes in Russia in 1983. There have been, of course, we're talking about the questions in Kulak's loyalty. I'm going to get them. Due to the enormous amount of distrust and tumult within the ranks of the FBI, inspired by his claims that the KGB mole was operating an agent, questions have been raised about whether he was ever a source of information. Editor J. Edgar loved him, but James Angleton, who I said an entire season, was about that and thought he was fake. This is also a guy who thought that the entire breakup between the Soviet Union and China was a deliberate attempt to mislead the U.S. intelligence community and foreign department. Like, he was a little crazy. Kulak apparently was a heavy drinker and overweight. He would drink a bottle of scotch during his debriefings, and this gave many people to believe that he was legit. In 1995, former KGB General Oleg Kalugin, another guy we could do a whole season on, said in an interview that not only was Kulak an authentic source, but the KGB did indeed have a mole operating in the FBI at the height of the Cold War. Kalugin said that many in the KGB suspected Kulak of working for the Americans, but his status as a war hero and the recipient of the hero of the Soviet Union meant that he was basically untouchable without like direct proof. Certainly, and now we're going to get to the last part. When the FBI spent from an article in the Smithsonian Magazine called "When the FBI Spent Decades Hunting for a Soviet Spy on Its Staff," a little bit more descriptive than some of the other things we've talked about. One night in 1962, a short, stocky Russian walked into the FBI office in Midtown Manhattan and offers his service as a spy for the U.S. Alexei Kulak, then 39, was working undercover as a Soviet official in the United Nations. He said he was unhappy with his progress as a true employer of the KGB. Yep, people do all sorts of things. Not everyone goes and defects for ideology. They just might be just pissed off about their role in life. Now we know, we were talking about when the FBI agent said, "Aren't you worried that the KGB may be watching this building?" No, all our people are out covering a meeting with your guy Dick. Your guy Dick. He said that the FBI had a mole in with this apparently set off an earthquake inside the bureau that reverted for decades and remains unsettled even now. Kulak became the FBI's Bureau Source 10 with the code name Fedora. Behind his back, apparently agents called him Fatso. The FBI assigned the name Unsub Dick, unknown subject to the mole Kulak said was inside the bureau. Kulak had scarcely left the building that night before the bureau launched a mole hunt that shook the foundation of the bureau. David Major spent 24 years as an FBI counterintelligence agent and was the first bureau official assigned to the National Security Council in the White House. Over the course of 3 decades, hundreds of agents' careers fell under the shadow of the investigation. In terms of corrosive effect, Major cites only one comparable event in U.S. intelligence history: the notorious mole hunt James Jesus Angleton. There's that name again. conducted with the CIA, which paralyzed the agency's Soviet operations and destroyed or damaged the careers of as many as 50 loyal CIA agents between 1961 and 1974, when Angleton was fired. By the way, Angleton believed that in the end, his boss at the CIA, the chief director of the CIA, was a KGB agent. That's just, you know, I shouldn't get into Angleton because, like I said, entire season. Well, the same thing happened to the Bureau. Dick ripped the Bureau apart, but it never became public. Our writer of this article said he first learned about Unsub Dick while researching his own book, Spy, the inside story of how the FBI's Robert Hansen betrayed America, another guy who could get a couple episodes out of. There's a movie, books, interviews, all kinds of stuff. When I approached Major back then about the hunt for Dick, he replied, "You make my hair stand on end when you say that name. How do you know about Unsub Dick?" And he declined to discuss the matter any further. But with the passage of time, Major and several others recently agreed to talk about it. This article, based on interviews with 30 current or former FBI agents, traces the course and effects of one of the most sensitive investigations in the Bureau's history. I'm not aware of any prior to Dick. The Bureau's first task was to ensure that it didn't assign the mission of finding Dick to Dick himself. Yeah. Producer Rick, the hunt was trusted to two trusted senior counterintelligence agents, Joseph J. Hengamul and Joseph J. Palguda. Interesting choice, two Joseph J's, who were good friends as well as colleagues. The other one was Hengamul was a big burly guy over 6 feet, brash cuss words with every other words. He was the Soviet program in New York. Hengamul would later move to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. as Soviet section chief. He retired in 1987 and died 2 years later. Palguda, too, loomed large. He was a big, balding, stocky guy, very intense. I always thought he was Slavic. You didn't want to tell him he looked like a Russian. You didn't like that. But Palguda had taught himself Russian from Berlitz recordings and was fluent in the language. According to John J. O'Flaherty, another former counterintelligence, accents was convincing enough that he would sometimes pose as a Russian. He retired in 76 and died in 88. Armed with a little more than a name and uncertain whether it was the target's real name or the KGB code name, Hengamul and Palguda set up to catch them all. If it was one thing you can say, now we know, looking back, the KGB especially, they like to make their, sorry about that, jeez. With 1,000, the KGB like to name their agents in relation to characteristics about them. So maybe Dick was Dick in the sense that he was a Richard, or that doesn't seem likely. It would be more likely that Dick was a Dick person, or maybe had a big dick. I don't know, but what I would certainly look into what the Russian word Dick is and see how to and look into like that and look for characteristics based on that. But that's only because I know stuff now that these FBI agents probably didn't know back then. But only the thing the mole hunters knew was that on the night Kulak walked in the FBI offices, Dick was out meeting with the KGB. So they started looking through everyone's time cards. When did they sign in? What was on their time card? Another... Well, they hailed their mission closer. Word got around as it delved into counterintelligence agents' backgrounds. They had their own special areas sealed off from the rest of the area on their own floor. So, of course, everyone started knowing where the mole hunters were gathering. And what was very big problem for everyone is that when you start looking for moles, you start looking into the backgrounds to see if what could be used to blackmail or get someone to join onto the other side. So anyone who had a drinking problem, an extramarital affair, was gay. One guy who used to go to a bar morning before he reported to work. Anything that could, financial records, all sorts of crazy things start getting looked into. And you are a counterintelligence agent. If you're one of these agents, people are, you don't want your bosses finding out about everything. They started... Dave Major learned about unsub Dick while he was assigned to the FBI's Newark office in 72. I was doing a stakeout on a kidnapping. We're doing the stakeout on the Bayonne Bridge. I was with an agent who had previously worked in the New York office. It was 2 or 3 in the morning, and the agent started telling me about the case. He got very emotional because as a result of the case, he was transferred to Newark. I was told by this agent that a significant number were transferred out of New York because of the search for unsub Dick. I was told of another agent on the West Coast who had been transferred for the same reason. Those transfers away from the access to the Bureau of Soviet counterintelligence operations were made to be on the safe side. So basically, well, we don't know if you're an agent or not. We're just going to move you out of this department into something else in another city. Whether this will damage your career or not, but at least we're not going to take any chances, and you're never going to work a counterintelligence operation ever again. Meanwhile, the investigation seemed to be getting no closer to its target than 64-65. A KGB agent, Valentin Lysov, alleged that the FBI had been penetrated, but again, offered no details. The mole hunters decided to try something new, a dangle operation in which they would send an FBI agent posing as a turncoat to offer service to the KGB in the hope that any conversation that resulted would elicit some clues to the entity unsub Dick. Dangles, just in my limited history of reading about them, don't seem to ever work. You just can't afford to give enough out that, though, if we ever watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that's all about dangling. So, in fact, a KGB and counterintelligence team showed up at the appointed time and place, ran the operation for 6 months. There were 3 or 4 meetings. We hope their question lead us to Dick, the question they asked and the question they did not ask, because they would imply the source already in those areas that might give us a clue to the identity of Dick. If the KGB asked for more information about something that Dick was working involved in, that might also point to Dick. But the KGB never asked the right questions, and the operation proved fruitless. Oh, that's great. See what I mean? Dangling doesn't seem to work. It went on for years. It drove us crazy, said agents. As the investigation persisted, it magnified a question that had arisen the moment Kulak presented himself to the FBI. Was he truly an agent in place for the FBI or a double agent planted by the KGBs? If he was a double agent, could his writing warning about unsaid Dick be trusted? Could the KGB just have planted the rumor around the office saying that we had an FBI agent under scrutiny or working for us just to prevent and discourage defections? They could have made up Dick, and it could just be, and just drop that to every agent who might be one around, and only 1 or 2 guys knew about him. That he was fake, an illusion, just to drive people crazy. We'll have more on that on a future episode on the Vietnam and Special Operations Group there. Kulak, the source of all this turmoil, had arrived in New York in 1961, only a few months before he turned up the FBI office alarming news about Dick. We've covered a lot of that stuff already. And the information gave those orders were for the most part good, very good on the identity of other KGB officers. There were those who said he drank so much nobody would ever pick him to be a plant. A former senior FBI division official says, my belief he was probably genuine. That doesn't not mean he was always truthful. In David Major's view, Kulak was one of the most important sources the FBI had. The KGB would never send a staff officer as a false defector. That's not necessarily true. What happens if he really defects? It's hard to dangle someone. You have to give up something. That's what I said. Dangling's hard. We put people in jail on the basis of information provided by Fedora. Another FBI counterintelligence says, Kulak, according to this agent, said Dick had given the KGB our surveillance codes. The code sheets were changed on a daily basis, but the Russians had the capability to monitor a broadcast. Like I said, looks like they get more into the... Okay. But others who have doubted that Kulak was working in the United States points out that when he returned to Moscow in 1976, he was not executed, unlike GRU officer Dmitry Fedorovich Polyakov, who provided valuable information to the CIA and the FBI for 18 years until the CIA mole Aldrich Ames betrayed him in the 80s. That's something to think about. Because Aldrich Ames was in charge of the CIA, and there's also going to be stuff talking about him, but Aldrich Ames' discussion is he gave up CIA assets Kulak was a FBI agent, so he might not have had a file to hand over. He just may not even been, probably was aware that someone existed, but he just didn't have that kind of information. In a 78 book, The Legend of the Secret World of Lee Harvey Oswald. We already talked about this book earlier, and it revealed Kulak's identity. And they're talking here about, once again, Ulag Kuligin, a major general in the KGB, basically said that that medal gave the Kulak protection. Now, Kuligin also said there's been, after his death in the mid-'80s, an analyst named Robert H. King concluded that he had identified unsub Dick. King had worked at the CIA before joining the FBI in 1980. He and his FBI colleague, James B. Milburn, specialized in detecting penetrations of the Bureau. King had the benefit of two pieces of information learned through Kulik on his second tour. First, that the KGB had a source from the FBI and lived in Queens, a bedroom borough of New York favored by a multitude of FBI agents who could not afford the rents in Manhattan. And second, the initial of the source's last name was the Cyrillic letter G, which was also his KGB code name. King wondered whether the KGB source in Queens was unsub Dick. They checked into the guy's background, found that the agent worked out not in counterintelligence, was on internal security and investigation of the Communist Party. And that might be also why this thing didn't work out. The FBI thought it was counterintelligence, that is, and it turns out it could have been this guy working on a related field, but not the actual field. He speaks Russian. King, who speaks Russian, translated the Cyrillic letter into a Roman one and got no match with the ex-agent's last initial. Then he realized that a Roman letter transliterated into Cyrillic may retransliterate into a different Roman letter. King tried it and got a match. After almost a quarter century, the FBI had its first viable suspect. They interviewed this suspect multiple times. Kulak said it could be retired and living out in Queens. Apparently they gave $100,000 money to Kulak, but basically they interviewed this guy multiple times. He never confessed. He was just kind of espionage. They said the problem is that espionage is a very difficult crime to prove. You got to get the guy red-handed, and so unless he's going to spontaneously confess. This agent was a poor performer. He had a host of other problems, including alcohol abuse, which could have made him a target for recruitment by the KGB. He retired on a medical disability around 1964 when he was in his mid-30s. So basically, this guy was there for a few years, providing information to the as an FBI mole, but really was not doing the kind of damage that the FBI thought. It was probably communist spying stuff. Spying on the Communist Party, providing information on that. And everyone knew in the office that there was this, basically, I'm going to guess in the KGB world, it was office gossip that the KGB had a guy working in the FBI, and it just never was known that this guy was, everyone just assumed he was working counterintelligence. And when Kulak walked in the office and said, Fedora walked in the office and said, you got this spy here, you need to find him, and complaining about him, even though he was complaining about him 10 years later on, even though the possible Dick guy had retired 6 years earlier. It's just one of those weird mysteries involved in another mystery of how the spy world works. So anyways, I'm hoping you'll enjoy this. This is kind of more the format I'm going to be trying to do from now on. We'll see how many videos I do on a regular basis, but this has kind of been an exploration of like spies and talking spy history, and I'm hoping to do more. This will become more the standard formatting of what we are doing. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, like, share, subscribe, watch, listen, learn. And I'm going to have a couple videos around here. There's a banner on the YouTube channel now. Tell your friends. This is what I'm going to try to do from now on. I'm going to talk about history. Anyways, I'm Dave March. I'm the Spy Guy, and I'm signing off. Stop.